first and foremost, a person who is a spiritualist, a faith-based person must, I feel, try to understand what is the divine, what is the Daivik means divine perspective on this. So otherwise we'll get caught in these conflicting narratives, because there's currently in the world, there is a informational war going on to capture our mind intelligence, and especially our emotions, to bring us to this side or that side. It can be very confusing. So therefore, a true spiritualist and a bhakti yogi, a devotee of Krishna, wants to ground oneself in one's spiritual practice, so one has a deep connection with God, and then hear the Vedic wisdom, so one can make decisions based on what is the Vedic wisdom, and how is that exemplified by the saints and sages. In this case, we have our spiritual master, spiritual teacher, Srila Prabhupada.
So over the past 2 weeks, a lot has happened in the world, and especially in America, when Charlie Kirk got shot at the university in Utah, and sort of this event sent ripples all across the world, on all social media platforms, television, even across countries. Here in Europe, we saw many protests, and resulting also in people speaking up, boldly sharing their point of view. You could really see that people's hearts and minds were disturbed, troubled, saddened also. And for many, it ignited a fire in them, standing up for what they believe, for what they think is right. And me personally, it also touched me. It led me to deeply reflect inwards and also outwards, searching for tools and answers. But that led actually to more confusion when I began to search for those answers, because our movement, the Krishna conscious movement, didn't provide so much of a response to what these things cause in the world and in us devotees. And on social media, there's also a lot of bias, there's a narrative, there's misinformation. So there were not so many channels offering a really transcendental perspective on these events. So I thought, okay, let's just take an initiative. Let's be a little bit like Charlie Kirk, take it in our own hands and open the dialogue to discuss these themes. So today we are very honored to have you, Badarayana Prabhu, all the way calling in from America, Srila Prabhupada's disciple. And yeah, we would love to hear your perspective on what happened and discuss a few of the sub-themes also coming out of this. So,
sure.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Citralekha, for inviting me onto your show. I'm very honored to be here. And I think, firstly, I would like to say that it's very important that as spiritualists, as bhakti yogis, as devotees of Krishna, that we understand what's happening in the world and bring a spiritual perspective to it. Because the world is full of so much confusion, so much division, so much animosity towards different, you could say, sides of the political or social, cultural, even religious spectrum. And the wisdom of the sages, the wisdom of the Vedic representatives of Vedic wisdom since time immemorial, have sought to elevate the consciousness of humanity, where there can be a unity in diversity and a focus on how do we attain peace, happiness, joy, and connection with nature, living entities, and ultimately with God, where our ultimate happiness comes from, because we are all part and parcel. We are emanations of that supreme reality of the Godhead. So oftentimes spiritual movements and people in spiritual movements can be somewhat divorced from the reality of what's happening in the temporal world. And I think that's something that you were seeing, Citralekha, that, okay, this massive earth-shattering event, this assassination, which really brought me back to the time of JFK. I was alive during when John F. Kennedy was assassinated. I watched it on my television when I was a very young boy. And same with Robert F. Kennedy Jr., same with Martin Luther King, 9/11, all these like horrific incidences. And so they really send a shockwave throughout the world, as you said, a ripple. And that ripple reverberates in our conscience, it shakes the core of our consciousness. How can these horrible things happen? And then, as you mentioned, that there wasn't really a response from the Krishna consciousness movement. And that, from what I gathered from our initial conversations and texts and just meeting just recently, that concerned you, that there was a, what's really happening? Why are we not responding? And how do we respond to this? Yeah. So I think it's very essential that we respond to these things and give a perspective on how to see things in a way that's uplifting, that gives meaning, and that celebrates people that who are actually representing some aspect of truth, and like that, which I firmly feel that Charlie Kirk was. Actually, I'm wearing a T-shirt that says freedom right now.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Kind of subtle, but
beautiful.
And ultimately, what is freedom? Freedom is the freedom to express oneself without being censored by a governmental agency.
Yeah.
And that in America, where I live, that freedom is protected by the Constitution and the First Amendment, the right to freely express speech and religious sentiments, religious expression. That's the First Amendment. So if we look historically at Srila Prabhupada, our spiritual master, who is my spiritual master, and you could say the world acharya, the great master he's there for everyone, for hundreds of generations to come, really, because his wisdom and his divya gyan, divine knowledge, is available to everyone. So, what was the point I was making? So his wisdom is meant for everyone. And how do we tap into that wisdom so we can make sense of these things? Yeah. So that's what we want to do today. And maybe we can start off with you. I would like to hear from you, Citralekha, what some of the questions you had, some of the concerns you had, and maybe we can address those one at a time.
Yeah.
If that's okay.
I had quite a lot, actually.
Yeah.
First of all,
because I really think about these things a lot, and I see the great need for devotees, spiritualists, spiritual seekers to really be able to dial into these things, make sense of them, and learn from them, and give a kind of sense of solace and direction to human society.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, first of all, I thought perhaps you could share how you reacted the moment that you heard this, what happened inside of you and your heart and your mind during this time, because you were really at the fire. You were there in America, very close.
Yes. It was shocking to me, and I began to weep, actually. And I began to really pray, because he hadn't been declared dead yet. So I was praying to Lord Nrsingadev, to God, to Krishna, to Lord Nrsingadev is the manifestation of God as the protector of the devotees, half man, half lion. And anyway, I was praying to God, to Krishna, please somehow save him. And of course, that didn't happen. But I was deeply affected, and I said, I was overcome with emotion. I was weeping, not sobbing, but I was crying, because I had studied Charlie Kirk, and I had been personally to one of his events here at the University of Florida, in Gainesville, Florida, just about, in the last 8-9 months, I was at one of his events, which was very powerful. And I'd also, again, I've seen many interviews. I've seen him, many presentations of his prove me wrong on campus debates with students. And so I was shocked, horrified, grief-stricken, and then, I shifted into, okay, who has done this mode? Who has done this? And kind of went into kind of investigative research mode. So, and then I ended up, I'm on a number of different threads, kind of internet threads. And so there's different people talking about it. So I chimed in and gave my perspectives. And I think that many devotees of Krishna had very little experience of Charlie Kirk, not really listened to him. So they had this, I saw many superficial, kind of renderings of what he is, and almost kind of minimizing him in certain ways. And so I felt compelled to kind of jump in and give my opinion. I would say kind of set the record straight, and no, you guys really don't understand who this man was and how powerful he was, and what a great example he was for any aspiring spiritual teacher to follow. And his fearless courage, his fearless, steadfast faith, and his graciousness and his kindness, and his being based in principle. So, that was the kind of the trajectory of my initial response.
How do you feel that we can form a perspective as a devotee that is quote unquote right in this time that there's so many algorithms and AI is sort of filtering what kind of information comes to us? How do we gain the right perspective if it's not provided from our authorities?
Great question, because we have, how does one gain a perspective? How does one form an opinion about an event like this, or any event really? Because we come to spiritual life and we have some scars, which means impressions from previous lifetimes, and we form we have a conditioning that we grew up with. We grew up with this political leaning, that political leaning, this cultural, intellectual leaning, or that, and different sides of the spectrum. Then we come to the absolute truth. We hear from the Vedic literatures. Veda means knowledge. Ultimately, the universe is created by the supremacy of the Godhead of God. We understand God. Krishna means the all-attractive, supreme, beautiful, the source of all things attractive. So everything is in God, and God is in everything. But God, Krishna, creates this cosmic manifestation according to a certain plan. So there are certain, you could say, objective realities in the world, because those are given by the supreme objective reality, which is God. So first and foremost, a person who is a spiritualist, a faith-based person must, I feel, try to understand what is the divine, what is the Daivik means divine perspective on this. So otherwise we'll get caught in these conflicting narratives, because there's currently in the world, there is a informational war going on to capture our mind intelligence, and especially our emotions, to bring us to this side or that side. And it can be very confusing. So therefore, a true spiritualist and a bhakti yogi, a devotee of Krishna, wants to ground oneself in one's spiritual practice, so one has a deep connection with God, and then hear the Vedic wisdom, so one can make decisions based on what is the Vedic wisdom, and how is that exemplified by the saints and sages. In this case, we have our spiritual master, spiritual teacher, Srila Prabhupada. So that's how I make my decisions. Now, what's interesting is that you see. And we see this especially in politics, that devotees of Krishna can be at totally opposite ends of the spectrum on these things. It's very fascinating. Like, whoa, hey, we're all supposed to be, bhakti yogis, devotee. How come this person feels this way and this person feels that way? And they're almost like they're at each other's throats. Yeah. See that online. So, we have to be very sober-minded and really study things in a very comprehensive way. So when I look at the Charlie Kirk phenomenon, I try to do it from the lens of what was the example of great saints and sages throughout history, and especially in our current time is Srila Prabhupada's, the Acharya means one who teaches by example. What was his example? And his example, being a spiritual teacher, should line up with other great teachers like Lord Jesus, Moses, the Buddha, so many other great teachers. So when I see who was Charlie Kirk and what did he do, and I saw him up close and personal, I was like, 40 feet from the guy when he was debating college students. Mm-hmm. So here was a man, he was a young man, driven by a passion to really put God first in everything. If you really study Charlie Kirk, his whole modus operandus was to put God first. His faith in God was the foundation of his life, and that gave him kind of a fearless, faithful courage. And it also gave him a graciousness, because he was grounded in that. He had a life full of prayer and study of scripture. So these are exemplary qualities. And then what he also translated that into the political arena, because he saw that society was being influenced by, you could say, liberal progressive values. Now, I grew up as a liberal progressive Democrat in the United States, but it was more kind of the classical liberalism of the JFK, RFK back in the day, when it was really based on equal rights and the freedom of expression. It wasn't based on a kind of like you could say, the modern aberration of that, which is this Antifa kind of radical communist Marxist burn it all down type of mentality. Mm-hmm. And Charlie saw that influence in society, which is based on ultimately that there is no objective reality, and there is ultimately no God, because what is Marxist communism? It is that religion is the opiate of the people. Mm. So, of course, religion misused and abused is a dangerous weapon, but in its true form, it's the liberation of the soul and the true happiness of the living being, to connect with one's source and have a loving relationship with God, with Krishna. So Charlie, he saw that these, you could say, the woke mind virus, the woke ideology of subjective reality, and trying to force that subjective reality on society. That there's not two genders. You can be whatever you want. There's no X and Y chromosomes don't matter. There is no God. Why are you preaching this God consciousness? There is no ultimate reality. It's just whatever we want. And we know what that leads to is a every man for himself type of chaotic situation, where there's no moral standards or moral codes. And he also, there's other topics, abortion, whatnot, he understood that there is a sacred essence of life within every living being. So his whole agenda and his whole, you could say, platform was to, let's talk about it. Let's have a conversation about it. Let's not fight each other. Let's have a conversation of ideas. In previous cultures, even in Lord Chaitanya's time, the incarnation of Krishna, who appeared just over 500 years ago as the combination of the divine masculine and the divine feminine of Radha and Krishna, the superlative love of the divine couple in one form, to teach the simplistic method of how to approach God in this way through the chanting of his names, but also to reveal deep esoteric truths of love of Godhead. So in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's time, the platform of the real standard of entertainment was the highest presentation of entertainment was debating, having these open forums of debate. Yeah. Great scholars would get together, hundreds of people would gather around, sometimes thousands, and they'd have these debate forums. So, and same with Socrates' time, Aristotle, the great thinkers of the time. And it should also be noted that Charlie Kirk was a great student of these great of the great philosophers of the West.
He used to read like 50 books a year
Yes,
or even
yes.
more. Yeah.
So he absorbed himself in knowledge, and ultimately knowledge of God.
Mm.
He was a biblical student, and he was a student of the great masters of philosophy, like I say, Plato, Aristotle, Marcus Aurelius, etc., etc. So, his platform was, let's have a conversation instead of like being at odds with each other and calling each other names and being violent. Let's discuss it.
That's beautiful. We need more of that in the world.
Well, I mean, if you analyze, um, I don't know how much, I mean, you haven't been around that long, the Krishna conscious movement. You've probably been to Rath Yatras, and
Mhm.
back in the day in America and in Europe, the big Rath Yatra festivals, there we always had these question and answer booths set up
Ah, yeah.
where there was a tent and it was, question and answers. So it was kind of like the Charlie Kirk, instead of saying wrong, it just was like
Yeah.
question and answers.
Now
So
it's a ask a monk.
yeah, ask a monk,
Yeah.
right? Ask a monk. Um,
Mhm.
don't be shy, ask a monk. And so it was a great forum, and this was, and I used to man one of these booths, at the New York Rath Yatra in New York City, because I lived in New York City for many, 25 years.
Oh,
So it was a phenomenal platform to connect with people and hear their
start the
questions.
dialogue.
Yeah, it was just fabulous. So this is what Charlie embodied. So he was, and he was such a fearless example of that. He established 2,200 Turning Point USA centers in colleges and high schools
Wow.
around the country. 2,200. So
Wow.
that's like saying if we had 2,200 little kind of Krishna conscious bhakti yoga outposts. And I mean, it's phenomenal what he did. And since his death, like at the time of his death, he had 1 million followers on social media. After his death, now he has about 14 million.
Yeah, I saw that.
And
Wow.
he's had
So
60,
he's the turning point now.
and he's had, because this kind of woke people up, like, who is this person? And when people listen to him, like, oh my God, this guy makes so much sense. Of
Mm.
course, from a Krishna devotee's perspective, we understand that there's more to what he's presenting. There's a whole other dimension that he was not familiar with in terms of Vedic wisdom, and you could almost say more complete understanding of God and
Yeah.
how to serve God and become God realized and self-realized in this age that we're living in. He hadn't been exposed to that.
Mm.
So we can offer so much more. At the same time, we celebrate what he gave, because when I think about it, who amongst the leaders of this Krishna consciousness movement, who's doing what he's doing? I don't see it.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I don't see it. And I don't see it, like, as you said, I don't see the institution responding to it in a way that really I feel they should have. They missed a great opportunity to really respond to the Charlie Kirk phenomenon and the brutal, horrific assassination of him and the martyrdom of him. One other statistic. Since his horrific death, although, as Erica explained yesterday in her talk, and another person explained, it was likely an instantaneous. And the people that were with him shortly after saw that almost like he was gazing into eternity. So, and Erica saw a kind of like a very subtle smile on his face. It's almost like God had appeared to him at that final moment and said, good work, job well done. Welcome back.
Yeah.
So, of course, we will never know, but based on the life that he lived, he definitely got a lot of mercy. So there has been 63 or 64,000 requests from different colleges and high schools to open up chapters of his Turning Point at those 64,000.
That's gigantic.
That's like there's 64,000 devotees of Krishna and bhakti yogis in different parts of the country
Whoa.
wanted to open up a you could say a teaching center, a cultural teaching center in
Yeah.
this college, high school, whatnot. That is incredible, incredible result of, you could say, the martyrdom that he died, but in his death, he has inspired countless, countless souls.
It
Pretty
was actually
incredible.
the opposite effect. They wanted to silence him, but he did the opposite.
Right. It's
Yeah.
so true. So true,
Mm.
Citralekha. I mean, look what happened to Jesus Christ, Yeshua,
Yeah.
Jesus of Nazareth. They tried to silence him. And how did that work out?
Yeah.
We can
Yeah.
see it all over the world.
I think Charlie Kirk had this, as you said, true boldness, and he was
Yeah.
not afraid at all. And Srila Prabhupada, I think, had the same quality. He responded also to things that happened within the world very quickly. For instance, we were in Holland just translating Easy Journey to Other Planets, the book, into Dutch. And I was going through the book and I was like, oh, this scientific paper, and then Prabhupada had an opinion about it, and then the moon landing, and he's responding to so many events within the world. I'm wondering, why do you think that our movement is not doing that anymore? It feels almost like we are afraid to take a stance,
Yeah.
whereas our philosophy is quite clear in some things that are right and some things that are obviously wrong. So, yeah, what are we afraid of, I
Great question.
suppose?
Great question. First, let me um, first I want to thank you for translating those books into Dutch. And I still weekly distribute Srila Prabhupada's books. I have the great honor of doing that till I want to do that to my dying day. But first, let me speak, before I answer that question, speak to Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada was the supreme example of this fearless presentation of the absolute truth. I mean, he came here when he was practically 70 years old. He came with the equivalent of, like 10 euros or 7 to 10 euros in his pocket, on a steamship with knowing nobody in the United States, on a cargo freighter across the Atlantic, where he suffered 2 very severe heart attacks and thought he was going to die because of the severity of the trip. And he came to Boston and New York, which is the epicenter of, you could say, in Judeo-Christian terms, sinful activity, sex, drugs, rock and roll, you name it. Yeah. And he came to deliver a message of supreme purity. No intoxication, no gambling, no illicit sex life, no meat eating. And he thought, they're going to run me out of the country. How is anybody going to listen to this? And he prayed to Krishna. Only by your mercy can you make my words effective to affect these people who are suffering, because he realized that people were suffering for lack of Krishna consciousness, of a connection with God that was real. And understanding who God is, that he's this beautiful person that loves us infinitely, and we can have a relationship with him and his consorts, such as Srimati Radharani and the gopis. And it's a whole nother esoteric subject in and of itself, which we won't go into today. But nonetheless, he came to bring the entire spiritual family of the spiritual world, to bring it to people and go, hey, you have a home. You have a divine, immortal connection with a divine, immortal reality. And so he was never back down. He wore his traditional dress. Even though they were drug addicted, sex addicted hippies, he said, no, you got to give up sex life, or at least have sex with one woman, one man, get married, do it honestly. No drugs, no coffee, no tea, no intoxication, no gambling, and you got to give up eating meat, and you got to offer everything to God, to Krishna. And he didn't back down from this. And he spoke, like they were talking about the moon landing. They were watching at 22nd Avenue, the initial Apollo moon landing on a little black and white TV, and they were watching it. And at a certain point, Prabhupada said, okay, turn it off. He said, that's why they call it the idiot box. He said they have never gone. So,
Oh.
and he disturbed a lot of devotees who had a great faith in modern science. Oh, they must have gone to the moon. Prabhupada said, no, they have never gone. So that's a whole nother subject matter, and something he said about that. Nonetheless, and Prabhupada also said on more than one occasion, he said, if they knew what I was actually doing, they would kill me.
Okay.
They would want to kill me, and they would kill me. And there are devotees that feel that that may have actually happened, that there was some. So that, again, is another subject matter. I'm not going to give my opinion on that. But he put himself out there, and he traveled the world 14 times from the time he was 70 to the time he was 82, constantly traveling. And he would sleep maybe 3 hours a night, get up at 1 o'clock in the morning, translate books. Because the instruction of his guru, his teacher, was you present these Vedic literatures, these eternal wisdom literatures that have been there since time immemorial. You translate them and present them to the Western countries, so people will have the opportunity to understand this knowledge and become free from suffering. And so Prabhupada, even though he was traveling constantly, 14 times across the world up until his 80s, he was only sleeping maybe three and a half hours a night, getting up every morning to translate these literatures, translate over 60 volumes of literatures. So he was such an example. He walked the walk. He talked the talk, but he walked the walk. So why is it now, the second question, why is it that the Krishna consciousness movement in its present, you could say, evolution or incarnation in the modern age is reluctant to speak about these things? Well, my opinion from studying this, and who am I? I'm just some guy, but I think I think about these things very deeply because I understand that Prabhupada wanted us to be relevant in the world. He wanted us, because if we're not relevant, we're not going to reach people. Not reaching people, we are not fulfilling our mission of somehow or another help these people who are suffering without knowledge of the ultimate reality. And therefore, it's our duty and our mission to somehow or another, as Prabhupada said in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, one famous purport, where Lord Chaitanya took sannyas from the Mayavad guru sannyasis because he saw that the Mayavads their hearts were hardened. They couldn't accept the beautiful divinity of God as a person, and a supreme person that has loving relationships with his intimate associates. So he said, let me take the renounced order of life in their order so they will listen to me. So in the purport, Prabhupada states, somehow or another, the members of the Krishna consciousness movement must strain their brains to think of different ways and means to attract people to this knowledge. So if we're not reaching people, then we're not following that, we're not straining our brains. So what I see, in answer to your question, I know it's a bit of a long-winded answer, forgive me.
That's okay.
Is that the leadership of our movement has become, I would say, somewhat infected, and not everyone, and they're all great souls. Anyone who is a devotee of the Lord trying to present this message is a great soul. So this isn't me kind of railing on, or this or that. But what I see is this general tendency to, it's kind of like churchianity, kind of organized religion becomes very comfortable within and of itself. And becomes comfortable. I have my community. And we were, in one sense, the devotees of Krishna were looked on as freaks, oddballs, a cult, when I grew up. Dancing around in sheets on the streets. And so I see that the general tendency of the leadership of the movement is we just want to be accepted in society. It's this like international society for acquiescence to the social mores. International society for let's play along to get along, That was not Prabhupada's mood. Prabhupada's mood was Prabhupada says,
he was clear.
With the scientists, kick on their face with boots. Rascal scientist. Prabhupada invokes very strongly, but he could get away with it because he had the purity.
Mm.
But he was coming from it's not that Prabhupada, it's not that I'm saying, it's Krishna states in the Bhagavatam, the ultimate authority of literature. This is how it is. So he was speaking on the authority of Vedic wisdom. So, and that's why he was so effective and why we love Prabhupada so much, and why when Prabhupada was on the planet, there was this massive enthusiasm to save the world. Like Hridayananda Maharaj, who I have a very close relationship with, his greatest malaise is that we have given up at the Western world. We're not reaching the Westerners, the young people of the West. In India, Krishna consciousness is flourishing, but in the West, the temples are pretty much mainly kind of become almost like Hindu temples.
Yeah.
Really, there's a few pockets that are really effective, like the Bhakti Center in New York is effective. There's a preaching center here at the Krishna House in Gainesville, Florida, University of Florida. There's small pockets of effective, outreach, but by and large, but even those, there is a mood to we just want to be accepted, just like you see even in the head of ISKCON Communications, who again is a great devotee, but you see that body and that personality attending climate change conferences as if it's the best thing since sliced bread, that we should be championing, climate change. And when we know from reading the Srimad Bhagavatam that the climate is always changing and it goes through cycles, but there's a prevailing narrative in the world that if we don't stop fossil fuels, if we don't, if all cars have to be electric, otherwise the greenhouse gases and carbon is going to destroy the planet, when actually carbon is the life-giving substance for greenery. So there's different, if you really investigate, there's different political agendas behind these things to control human society. So I just see that there is a tendency of the leadership to be affected by this mood of fitting in, being accepted, and being led by sentiment rather than truth. And Charlie Kirk stood for being led by truth rather than sentiment. And he was a gracious person. He was kind, he was loving, but he wasn't sentimental. And that's what Prabhupada was. So, I think that we need to really kind of light a fire under our rear ends and really meet the people where they are and speak the truth boldly, but in a loving way.
Yeah, because how can we bridge that gap without creating that internal division between devotees?
The division is always going to be there. So I think that as devotees, we have to be very careful to not cross the line. What line is that? Vaishnava etiquette. Vaishnava etiquette means that there's a certain decorum in how we see and treat each other. Like I have devotees that I'm friends with that are elevated devotees, but I think they're completely off the wall when it comes to understanding certain things. Like for instance, COVID. They bought the narrative of, we got to take the vaccine, get 2-3 vaccines. And even leaders, gurus that I had, many discussions with and arguments that, and that was a great schism of faith, that there were so many leaders within the Krishna consciousness movement that bought the narrative hook, line, and sinker, bought the whole COVID narrative, which is ultimately a biological weapon that has now been shown to severely harm the biosphere of the living being, and especially the reproductive organs. So, that's a whole nother discussion. But at the same time, they're great souls. So I think that we have to it's a matter of maturity and broad-mindedness, that on one side, we have to really deeply understand the issues and how they align with what Prabhupada's example was and continues to be. and the Vedic literatures. And and at the same time, understand that anyone who has dedicated their life to spiritual practice, Krishna consciousness, is a great soul. So kind of like hold people in two realities. And that's basically that's my realization.
Okay.
But at the same time, we can't be afraid to speak the truth and call out, just like, for instance, I'm on these threads, and one devotee was like, "Oh, Charlie Kirk, because he was speaking the way he did, he almost brought this on himself because he didn't have the requisite amount of love." And I'm like, okay, so can the same be said for Jesus? Did Jesus not have the requisite amount of love?
And what did he respond?
They accepted my arguments. I said, what about Martin Luther King? What about Robert F. Kennedy Jr.? What about Srila Prabhupada? Did he not have the requisite amount of love? So what about Gandhi? I mean, obviously Gandhi was not a pure devotee, but when you speak the truth, I mean, Charlie Kirk threatened the very establishment of the prevailing narratives of kind of social Darwinism, of neo-Marxist philosophy, of putting God at the center. That is the people that run the world. They're either atheists or they're Luciferian, or some combination of the two. They are like the Hiranyakasipus. Hiranyakasipu is not a myth. Why did he want to kill his son? Because his son worshipped God as opposed to worshiping his father as God, the most powerful man in the universe. So is it that those people don't exist now? Of course they exist. Prabhupada said in many in the Bhagavatam and that was a path of Rajavidya, the book Rajavidya, that the world is, and also in the Bhagavad, the world is being run by man-eating Rakshasas. The world is being controlled and run by man-eating Rakshasas. Is that a myth? No, it's a fact. There are demonic beings that are controlling the world. When Rupanuga and Balavanta, who were Prabhupada's early disciples, and I'm friendly with both of them, they presented to Prabhupada this book called None Dare Call It Conspiracy, which is about all the kind of the controlling families of the world. And they said, Prabhupada, this book talks about these 13 families that control the world, and are these the Rakshasas that you were talking about when you make these statements? Prabhupada said, yes. And he was talking about Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, etc. Even if you go on the CIA website, CIA.gov, there's an article called The 13 Bloodlines of the Illuminati. So, the truth is, Prabhupada said there are 13 families that control the world. So the point being is that there are demonic forces that are at war with humanity and with God consciousness. And Krishna came paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya chaduskritam. Krishna came, where Krishna comes, God comes to destroy, to protect the pious and to destroy the demonic. So we have to be very discerning as devotees to see, what energy are we being influenced by? Because the narratives that are out there in the media, especially the mainstream media, they're very well crafted. It's almost like a form of mind control brainwashing.
How can we really know if we see it done right, in the right way?
Yeah, great question. So it requires study. It requires purification of the heart. And it requires, how much does this align? Just like, for instance, so yeah, I'll just go back to these threads that I was saying. So the devotees were saying, well, he wasn't, he got what he was coming. He was speaking hateful. Another devotee said, well, he said this thing racist and that thing racist. I said, well, let's look at those things he said. So I listened to their comments and I watched those clips, and I said, there's nothing racist about what he's saying. He's saying that people are being hired based on there's racial quotas. We have to hire 50%, like for instance, the airlines. Yeah. There is a quota. We have to, 50% of our hiring should be Black or women. And they lowered the standards, so more Blacks and more souls in a feminine female body could meet the standard, especially people, Black and female body. it wasn't based on, and Charlie Kirk said, you know, is this right? Shouldn't, especially flying an airplane, not to speak of anything else, being a doctor, shouldn't it be based on, as Martin Luther King said, we should judge a person not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character, by the integrity of their character. So we should base, you know, what is the whole Varnashram system? It's people are being situated in society according to their qualifications, their work, their tendencies to work in a certain capacity, and their qualifications. So Charlie Kirk was saying, no, we should, common sense. He was the purveyor of common sense, as Prabhupada. Why do we love Prabhupada? Prabhupada would in one statement like, no, that's nonsense. This is how it is, you know.
Yeah.
Common sense based on wisdom coming from God, coming from the Supreme Personality of God, of the Vedic wisdom. Charlie Kirk kind of represented that in his own kind of Christian way, because it was a kind of based on Judeo-Christian basic fundamental values of Dharma, which we share with him. So how do we know it? Just like, for instance, if we study Srila Prabhupada, Prabhupada made many, many statements against communism. He said, this communism is destroying human society, and the communists must be stopped. And therefore, I want my American disciples to, they should be very serious about stopping this communist threat. Otherwise, it will destroy all of human society. Because what does communism mean? It means atheism. Okay. It means ruling by the collective. The collective is God. There is no God. And we see that much of the philosophies of, you know, like for instance, BLM, Antifa, there's a kind of a total infiltration of the educational system by this kind of communist Marxist ideology. And it's understandable when the young people are not educated, because another thing that I was just listening to an interview this morning with Charlie Kirk and Tucker Carlson, where Charlie Kirk was saying from his being on over 1,000 college campuses, that the main thing that the young people are concerned about is economics. They can't even afford to buy a house, how they can live in the world. And he said, unless we provide an answer to them, they're going to go the way of socialism. Everything is free. We can do, you know. So the Vedic system has a brilliant answer for those things, which that's another topic we can discuss. So if you see devotees going down this path of embracing kind of the social Marxist ideology, that's something that Prabhupada railed against, because it's not the free market system. Like, for instance, Sri Dayananda Maharaj explains very brilliantly that in the Vedic system, there is anarchy, monarchy, capitalism, and socialism. For the monarchs, they were the kings, but they were guided by the Brahmins, who were, in a sense, they were anarchists. They didn't have anybody controlling them. They were guided by wisdom, right? And the Vaishyas, the capitalists, were governed by a free trade market economy capitalist system. But then there were workers who were not so inclined in this passion endeavor, and they were taken care of by the other orders of society. So there was socialism among. So the Vedic system kind of naturally, brilliantly incorporated all these different isms in one brilliant system that was centered on God. So so to answer your question, it requires study and the courage and discernment to not go along with prevailing narratives if they don't resonate with truth.
Okay. But if we do this research, and I experienced that a little bit during these past 2 weeks, I tried to research and go into this and to that. It's a rabbit hole also. You can get really caught up in it. And I felt also that it was disturbing my consciousness at some point. I was getting caught up in these emotions, going this way, going that way, also rajas and tamas prevailing, and especially rajas, because you get fired up because of the injustice that you see. How do we deal with that? How do we stay involved but still aloof enough so that our consciousness remains on the sattvic platform?
Yeah. Brilliant question, Citralekha. At the end of the day, as devotees of Krishna, as yogis, spiritual aspirants in the path of bhakti, first and foremost, we have to save ourselves. So first and foremost, if these things are affecting us too much, we have to pull back. Because at the end of the day, which is actually at the end of our life, what really matters? Are we self-realized? Are we God conscious? Are we lovers of God? Are we fully Krishna conscious? Are we thinking of Krishna at the time of death, ultimately? Because the whole purpose of life is a test. How are we living and orienting our life and our mind and emotions so that at the time of death, we are single-mindedly fixed on the lotus feet of Krishna and the holy name of Krishna. So we can because whatever state a person is thinking of at the exact time of death, to that state one will attain in one's next lifetime. That's Bhagavad Gita, 8th chapter. Krishna is explaining to Arjuna. So if these things are too disturbing to us, we have to increase our spiritual life and pull back a little bit. For me, because I see that this is a great dilemma, it's not for everyone. This type of research into what's going on in the world can be a great impediment in one's spiritual life. At the same time, like for me, I find it very nourishing because I make sure that I have a baseline of in the morning, I don't get involved in social media. I don't get involved in the news. I just fix myself on hearing and chanting and remembering and praying and doing some good things for my body, such as exercise, yoga, etc., breathing exercises. So I establish a baseline of being grounded in eternal reality and in my body, a balance. Only from that platform can a aspiring spiritualist have the wherewithal not to be pulled into these lower modes of nature when dealing with these things. And still, even then, it is likely to happen. So that's number one, having a very strong spiritual sadhana. And then being able to find sources of information that are credible and grounded in some spiritual reality. So
that's difficult these days.
It's difficult, but it's doable.
You mean scripture, or you mean?
Not necessarily. Like, for instance, there are, like, I have multiple sources of information that I go to. And generally those sources from my investigation have some type of spiritual culture as their background and basis. Not everyone, but the background of their personal life has integrity and spirituality and religion to some degree. So, I look for that in the people that you could say, listen to or get information from. And whoever I get information from, I don't immediately accept it. I hold it up against the light of Vedic wisdom and see, does this pass the, you could say, sniff test or smell test? Does this resonate with Vedic wisdom and how we can apply it in the world? Because it is challenging, especially if one is not, you could say, deeply read into or studied in these matters. It can be, because one can come to the completely opposite conclusion. I see that all the time. Again, I see that it's due to a poor fund of knowledge and being led by sentiment and emotions and the very powerful control mechanisms of the media, because the media has an agenda. If there's many times where you hear the exact same talking points: threat to democracy, this person, threat to democracy, and every media outlet, or they say the same thing about this issue, that issue. They're all, it's called the mockingbird media. It's an echo chamber of the exact same talking point. So when you see that, you go, oh my God. Just like my wife, she we've been married for a very long time and a very successful relationship. But we were at odds during the election cycle, about 10 years ago, 9 years ago, and during the COVID time. So we were a bit odds on our views on kind of geopolitical affairs and politics. And remember, one day she was watching CNN and she saw the spinning, deadly COVID virus spinning, and she just had this awakening. It was incredible, this epiphany. She said, "Oh my God, they're trying to brainwash us with fear with this COVID thing." And it just somehow kind of shook her reality, the kind of hypnotic grip that mainstream media has. And we're talking about every aspect of mainstream media.
Mm-hmm.
All the major news outlets, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Huffington Post, NPR, Rolling Stone, you name it. And I'm sure that, and the equivalents in the EU.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, but I would imagine the Guardian, et cetera, et cetera. So many different outlets are there. BBC. I don't know what they are in Holland.
Yeah.
But
adding even also AI that is creating information or images or things that don't even exist.
Right. So that's another, we're living in really freaky times. Really freaky
It's just the beginning of Kali Yuga.
Yeah. But I will say this, that we know that there will be a golden age in the age of Kali, where there will be a massive increase. We know this is predicted in the scriptures.
Mm-hmm.
And this is predicted that from the advent of Lord Chaitanya 500 years ago, that marked the beginning of the golden age of Kali. Well, there'll be a massive increase in spiritual culture and bhakti yoga.
Mm-hmm.
And now for that to happen, how does that happen in this contaminated environment that we're living in? Well, there has to be a clearing out of demonic forces for that to happen. There must be. So what do we see simultaneously to all this insanity that's going on in the world? What happened during the COVID era was the Great Awakening.
Mm-hmm.
There was a great awakening of people going, whoa, wait a second. None of this makes sense. Wearing masks, getting locked down 6 feet apart, shutting down the schools, taking a toxic injection, which they tried to hide the ingredients for 75 years.
Mm.
And all this now kind of disease, death, destruction as a result of that. None of that made sense. So there was this quite a phenomenon of people waking up to, like, I don't believe what the media is telling me. The whole Trump phenomena also was part of that. Like, there's this, orange man bad, he's nuts, he's a dictator. And then a lot of people were like, well, okay, but that's what the media, well, like, what's really going on? So, that's a whole nother subject. I don't necessarily want to go into that now because it's very divisive. But the point is that a lot of people started to kind of wake up from the stupor of buying everything the media was feeding them and taking a step back and going, what is really happening?
Yeah. With this.
So it's very challenging. I totally get that.
Mm. Yeah, with Kali Yuga being sort of in full force right now, and we can read in the scriptures what is still awaiting us. Is there a certain level of Kali Yuga that we should just accept? Okay, these forces are going to be there, or should we actively fight harder as we see more of Kali Yuga developing in the world?
Well, what was Prabhupada's example?
Fight
what
harder,
was
I guess.
What was Jesus? What was Lord Jesus Christ's example? Fight more. He never backed down, nor did Srila Prabhupada.
Mm.
So once we give in to, like, okay, then we are opening the door to our own destruction and the destruction of society. We always have to be vigilant. We've heard it time and time again. Spiritual's life is like a razor's edge.
Mm. Yeah.
So
because that's what I sometimes feel when people are silent when these big things happen. That is sort of an acceptance of a degree of evil or a degree of demonic force.
Exactly. And what did I say when you asked me the question about why is it that the Krishna consciousness movement has not taken a stance?
Mm-hmm.
Because I see that by their silence, they've opened the door to an acceptance.
Mm.
Again, it's like the International Society for Let's Fit In.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Let's acquiesce, not necessarily acquiesce, but let's be accepted by the mainstream. Prabhupada wasn't interested in that. He
Mm-hmm.
wanted to be accepted by scholars, but on the meritocracy of the eternal truths of Vedic knowledge, Vedic wisdom.
Yeah.
And then people would come to us, people, and that's what happened. People came to us because of the forceful, courageous, faith-based integrity of Srila Prabhupada's presentation.
Mm-hmm.
And I do feel, and Charlie Kirk embodied that. Again, it was coming from an evangelical Christian, and that can be kind of a turn on to people because there's so much more to the reality than just, Jesus is the way, the truth, and the light. Prabhupada accepted Jesus as our guru, but he wasn't the only guru.
Yeah.
He wasn't the only son. How can God only have one son? Does that make sense? I mean, how, no. Jesus said, I've come to show the potential of all men and women. That we're all we're all can be, good sons of God.
Yeah. And I believe he also said that I want to tell you more, but I cannot at this moment. You're not ready.
Yes, I have much more to tell you, but ye cannot bear it now.
Yeah.
And Prabhupada gave that's the beauty of Krishna consciousness. It gives the entire picture. All the things that Jesus meant to reveal but could not, because the people were what? Simple fishermen. They were very simple people at the time. Krishna comes in history, in the evolution, as a message according to the time, place, circumstance, and mentality of the people. Just like Buddha came at a time when people were using the Vedic literatures to justify animal slaughter for their own sense gratification. So he came and he did away with the Vedic literatures and emphasized, he said, they're misleading you. Forget the scripture, just be in the present moment, be mindful, but first and foremost, always practice nonviolence. So he gave a particular teaching Christ gave a particular teaching according to time, place, and circumstance. He spoke in simple stories and parables, but he gave the eternal truths. What he gave was the eternal reality of God consciousness, Krishna consciousness. But Prabhupada gave the full spectrum. That's why we have so much to offer people. But we have to be out there like Charlie Kirk was.
Do you have any practical steps how we could do that? Like how we could stay relevant?
Exactly what we're doing now. Exactly. You're going to put this out there in a media format. I'm myself and my wife and my partner, we're going to be starting this podcast. You see behind me, it's called The Eighth House.
We're looking forward.
And that's going to be coming to a YouTube Rumble channel near you very soon. And we're going to be discussing these things from the geopolitical current affairs from the lens of the spiritual perspective. I think that we just need to be out there. My wife and I are also professional musicians, so we kind of put these messages out in our music. We're going to be reintroducing our music through the podcast. Somehow or another, whatever our talent is, we have to get out and meet the people. I mean, I go out and I distribute books every weekend, so I meet a lot of people, and Prabhupada wanted his books to be distributed, and because he said the greatest gift to human society is knowledge. The greatest gift to human society and the greatest gift to alleviate the suffering of human society is knowledge. Somehow or another, just like you have your Vedic wisdom, Vedic essence, you have your Bhakti Club, you're doing fantastic things. I would just really encourage you to do these things to the max and just keep getting better and better at it. Somehow or another, we have to put ourselves out there. There's a certain phenomenon also of devotees that, there's a tendency sometimes to think that we can find more outside of Srila Prabhupada.
Oh.
There's certain different offshoots of the Krishna consciousness movement, different gurus, all of whom I have respect for. But their emphasis is, we just got to find your spiritual form and just focus on that. And that is there in our Gaudiya tradition. Ultimately, that's the highest realization. But Prabhupada's emphasis was somehow give this message to others. And through that mercy, and also working on our own internal, we have our external life of giving, trying to be a teacher in some sort, and our internal life of cultivating purity and love of God within. Mm-hmm. So those are two parallel paths that we have to cultivate simultaneously. That's my realization.
Yeah.
And by that, but we find if we really study Prabhupada, the Prabhupada gave us everything. And if we fully take shelter of the mercy of Srila Prabhupada, everything is revealed. Mm. That's my conviction.
Beautiful. Yeah, when I listen to Srila Prabhupada's lectures, we have this little Prabhupada box with all of his lectures. And
right. Yes, I have that too.
And in every lecture, he states the basics. You are not this body, you're not this mind, you're the spirit soul. And what I see in our society nowadays is that we have matured. So it feels like, okay, many people, many devotees, they have heard throughout the years about a lot of the topics, a lot of the pastimes of Prabhupada. The basics are now somewhat skipped, I feel. That in many classes, more higher topics are discussed, and then stepping over these basics. And for me, it feels that it's difficult for people to click in who are new, to click into the lectures that are being given, all the high Srimad Bhagavatam analysis. Could you respond to that?
Yes. I was speaking to one senior devotee recently, and he asked me, he's a very, very thoughtful person. His name is Nishringananda. He was in charge of ISKCON television. He's made many movies. He was a big producer in Hollywood before he became a devotee. And he's also trying to get certain movies made now as well. But was also the head of the director, or I forgot the title. Are you familiar with Sabha? Sabha is it's a Brahminical body that advises the GBC of ISKCON. So he was the head of Sabha for many years. He's revered as a real, a man of balance and wisdom and experience. And he said to me, what do you think the greatest challenges to the Krishna consciousness movement are now? So I gave him my answers. And I asked him, what are you? He said, I see that the greatest challenge, maybe not be the right, greatest concern is the tendency towards sahajaism. Sahaja means thinking oneself on a higher platform when one is not actually there in reality, which cheapens the process. Mm-hmm. So just like there's an emphasis on speaking of higher subject matters. So again, that is without question part of our tradition. We're meant to attain these states, but not at the sacrifice of really embodying the basics and being available to be out in the world helping people. Because what happens when you focus on those things, that's where your energy goes, and your energy isn't as concerned with helping the plight of people that are suffering in the world, which is countless souls. Countless souls. I mean, the world is just on fire. People are suffering like anything. Mental distress, anxiety, confusion, war, strife, conflicting narratives, trying to make sense of it all with no real connection to God. And so they're unhappy, miserable, and they do very bizarre things to themselves and others.
Mm-hmm.
In a very simplistic way, they're just not happy. They're not fulfilled. They're not joyful. So if we, Prabhupada's time and time again, just like you talking about listening to Prabhupada's lectures, like for instance, I think it's important for anyone to be really empowered in this day and age to hear from Srila Prabhupada daily, because Prabhupada is that person, that personality, that divine personality who embodied the mercy of Lord Nityananda. Lord Nityananda was, of course, Krishna's brother Balaram, who came in the mood of total magnanimity, just giving Krishna consciousness, qualified or unqualified. And he was the embodiment of this like kind of crazy love, just like a wild man of just unrequited love of God and love for humanity, to give them love of God, to give them happiness that's not available through the pursuit of materialism. And Prabhupada you could say that he was a divine expansion of that energy of Lord Nityananda. Mm-hmm. And Prabhupada's mood was somehow or another, if you listen to Prabhupada daily, as I do, and I think you do too, you hear that message that somehow or another give this knowledge to others, somehow or another help save the conditions, help save the world. Simultaneously, when one does that, one feels an inner enrichment. And I think that we have to really focus on praying for the mercy of Prabhupada and the holy name. And through the mercy of Prabhupada and the holy name, everything is revealed. The entire spiritual world is revealed. So that internal path and that of cultivation of that dependence on the pure devotees, Srila Prabhupada, the holy name, which is the method of self-realization in this age, and simultaneously trying to in some way give this knowledge to others because we know it will help them and liberate them from suffering. The combination of those two will ensure our steady path to enlightenment and love of God. Yeah. So I think that the emphasis on the higher things, it's a danger. And if it's tempered with a kind of the basic instructions of the mood and mission, what was Prabhupada's mood? What was his mission? His mission was to save all of humanity. His mission was also to help us each develop love of Godhead, but they were not mutually exclusive. Yeah. Two parallel tracks. So we can analyze, have some self-observation. Are we going too much this way or that way? There should be two parallel tracks. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. It's not only when I listen to Prabhupada, but also something happens when I read his books. For instance, when I'm reading Srila Prabhupada's Srimad Bhagavatam, then there are so many purports that are speaking about how Vedic king should rule and how what he should do and the decisions he should make. So I'm seeing that Prabhupada in a way, in that way, is also using politics, right? He's sort of navigating through that forest. So what would happen if we would also do that? And we are gonna comment on these events that happen. I feel like if you take a bold stance, how do you deal with the negativity that is coming from others as a first one, as devotees who are not appreciating that and who are against it? How do you deal with that personally? And the second question, let's see. That, for instance, in Christianity, it's much clearer. Like you obey Jesus Christ, you surrender unto him, or you are fallen and you're gonna go to hell, basically. In our philosophy, we have a much more universal approach, so we are much more open, and that's why we maybe cannot take a firm stance on every single political issue. So, yeah, those two questions. Yeah. I don't know if that makes sense.
I really appreciate your thoughtfulness. I really appreciate your intention and to contemplate these very important issues and questions. This is a very, I'm not trying to just puff you up, I'm just speaking honestly, that it's very nice quality. Because these are questions that I think we're all struggling with, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So you're articulating them in a way I think that everybody can appreciate, and certainly I can appreciate. So to answer your question, first of all, let me read something from the Srimad Bhagavatam, fourth canto, okay? This is during the fourth canto, chapter 14, verse 41. The great sages began to think that although a Brahmin is peaceful and impartial because he is equal to everyone, it is still not his duty to neglect poor humans. By such neglect, a Brahmin's spiritual power diminishes, just as water kept in a cracked pot leaks. That's the verse. Purport. I'll read the purport by Srila Prabhupada, just bear with me. Brahmins, the topmost section of human society, are mostly devotees. They are generally unaware of the happenings within the material world because they are always busy in their activities for spiritual advancement, right? Nonetheless, when there is a calamity in human society, they cannot remain impartial. If they do not do something to relieve the distressed condition of human society, it is said that due to such neglect, their spiritual knowledge diminishes.
Wow.
Wow.
Which verse is this?
That's 4:14:41.
Wow.
4:14:41. So
that's beautiful.
Very profound. Prabhupada is saying, first of all, the Bhagavatam is saying, Prabhupada clarifies it in the purport, that a spiritual person, so we'll say Krishna devotee, a bhakti yogi, is basically unaware of the happenings in the material world because they're absorbed in their own spiritual culture. Yeah, we see that. He said, however, when there is a calamity in the world and people are really suffering, then if that spiritualist remains impartial and does not do something to uplift the people and help the people, then that person's spiritual knowledge diminishes.
Wow.
So we see now that, like for instance, during the COVID time, we saw that there is this, anybody that was really looking, that's what the Great Awakening is about. We saw that there is a orchestrated, well-planned agenda and assault on humanity from many different vectors of harm, in this case, biological and psychological. So much so that actually many devotees have perished as a result, and it has affected the community. I mean, one of my dear friends, Bhakti Swami, died as a result of the hospital protocols that were mandated during COVID, which were deadly. Remdesivir specifically, which was the only designated, only authorized protocol for treatment of, what they determined COVID-19 was. And remdesivir drug was the only thing that was mandated and allowed in the hospital. Although in the clinical trials, 53% of the people that took that drug had total organ failure, which is what happened to Bhakti Swami. And then his lungs filled up with water, which happens when your organ fails. They put you on a respirator, and about 90% of the people on the respirator died. And that's what happened to him. He should have never died. So there's an assault on human society by the asuric or demonic forces that be the Hiranyakasipus of the world. And people are suffering as a result of this. If the saintly people do not understand what the plan of the asuric or demonic beings is who run the world and how to counteract that, then they will be overcome by that. Just like in Sri Upanishad, verse 11, it states that one must cultivate a knowledge of the eternal spiritual principles alongside a knowledge of the workings of the material world. So by so doing, one can understand these workings and overcome them by spiritual knowledge and attain the full blessings of immortality.
Mm-hmm.
Prabhupada said in a simpler way, he said, one should be intelligent enough to understand and calculate the darker side. Prabhupada said in at least 2 lectures, one should understand the darker side. Prabhupada said, just like in business, if you think, oh, I have a great business, everything's going great, I'm just going to count my money. He said, if you don't understand how the competition is trying to cheat you, or people within your organization may be trying to, and you'll be cheated and you can lose everything. Yeah. Or if you're in a battle, in a war, if you don't understand how the enemy is working, that's what spies. What is the plans of the enemy? Then you're going to be overcome by the enemy. So in the same way, Maya and her energies, and in this case, very powerful demonic beings that run the world. Prabhupada said the world's being controlled by man-eating Rakshasas. They have an agenda which is anti-God and anti-human. If we do not understand how that plan is being enacted, then we will be overcome by that. Now, second part of that question is, so the spiritual devotee should, by one's very nature of this directives of this verse and purport, we should take an interest in how the demonic energies are working to impede the flow of Krishna consciousness in the world and divide and conquer within the Krishna consciousness movement. Because we should not be naive enough to think that those forces are not within the movement as well. They are.
Oof. Yeah.
Prabhupada stated on many occasions. I was Rupanugas with Prabhupada, and Prabhupada said, two demons have just entered our movement.
Wow. You could feel that?
No, Prabhupada said that.
No, but Prabhupada felt that, or he could see by someone's actions?
I don't know. You'd have to ask Prabhupada. You can't do that. But he said, 2 demons have just joined our movement.
Wow.
I know one devotee, Tapapunja, Prabhupada disciple. He was in prison for 4 years. And it was part of the whole New Vrindavan thing. He didn't do anything nefarious, but anyway, it's a long story. Wonderful devotee, very saintly, actually. He was friends with a blind CAA operative who befriended him likewise. And this is a very high-level CAA guy he wasn't willing to do certain things that the CAA wanted to do, so they basically arranged for him to be arrested, prosecuted. He was blind from an operation where he was on the border of Iran and Iraq and was sent to deactivate. One of his specialties was deactivating suitcase nuclear weapons. And it was a mission that went awry, and all of his team was killed, but he had this Kevlar in his brain from being in Vietnam and shrapnel, and they shot him in the head, but it didn't kill him. But it saved him because of this Kevlar, but he was blind. Anyway, he had files of assassinations that he had arranged all over the world of political operatives in South America and all over the world. And he's told Tapapunj that he said the CIA, he called it the company, they call it the company or the agency, we will infiltrate any entity, any organization, any institution, any religion that is bringing people away from the narrative that we want the people to believe. And Tapapunj just laughed. He said, yeah, but no way you could have infiltrated the Hare Krishna movement. And come on, getting up at 3:30 in the morning, shaving your head, chanting on beads. And this guy just laughed at him. He said, you are so naive, Tom. He said, we easily infiltrated your movement in the 1970s. Easily.
Wow.
Well, Preetu, I don't know if you know Preetu. Preetu was traveling, taking a cross-country trip between New York City and Los Angeles, and he had his japa beads. And one man next to him said, oh, I see that you have these beads. Are you a member of the Hare Krishnas? He said, yes. And they began talking, and he revealed to him and said, in the 70s, I was a CIA operative tasked with bringing down your New York temple so as to help destroy your movement.
Wow.
So, and Prabhupada, there's many statements, I could say many statements of Prabhupada.
Then it's very hard to, if you know that information, to trust. people,
Well,
devotees.
yes. We have to be able to trust, but we have to be able to trust the right people. Because if there's no trust, then we're just like we're meant to love and trust. We're meant to
Mhm.
love and trust, but we have to be very discerning.
Yeah.
We have to be careful where we put our love and our trust. Because we're meant to love and we're meant to trust,
Mhm.
because that's the spiritual dimension. But if we're not careful, we'll be overcome, taken advantage of, and deceived. So it requires a certain kind of spiritual maturity, dexterity, um, which is worth cultivating. Otherwise, as they say in French, we're fucked. Excuse my French.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like, for instance, if you saw the new Nirshima Dev movie,
Yeah, it's
all the
phenomenal.
all the demons are portrayed with teeth and ugly and this and that. And also when we read Srimad Bhagavatam, these are man-eating persons, and but when we see demons in the society now, they don't look like that, but they can still have the demoniac mentality. And I think maybe there's where we are a little bit naive, that we are expecting people with teeth and I don't know, right?
Yeah.
Looking very different, but they
We have
might
to
be the same as us.
judge by one's actions, as Martin Luther King said, we have to judge by the as actually Bhaktivinoda Thakur. I'll give you another quote that's pretty mind blowing in this regard.
Okay.
If I can find it here. You're gonna love this. You're gonna love this one.
Okay.
Let's see. After this is Bhaktivinoda Thakur.
Mhm.
At the time of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, those faithful to him kept apart from non-devotees to avoid contamination. Seeing this, the personality of Kali sent his representatives in disguise to pollute the Vaishnav Sampradaya.
Mm.
Posing as Vaishnavas, they spread their wicked doctrines and appeared so intelligent and devoted. They appeared so intelligent and devoted that only pure devotees could detect their real identity. Most devotees, not only the most neophyte, were enchanted by their tricks. In this way, Kali's agents introduced karma, jnana, and anya bilasa in the Vaishnav Sampradaya and caused Sudha Bhakti to vanish from the world. Yeah.
Oof.
There's Prabhupada's servant, Nanda Kumar, states in the Prabhupada Memories, Prabhupada told me something personally. His divine grace said, there are those among us wearing dhoti, sika, tilak, and neck beads, but they are not devotees. They are agents of Kali who are here to try to stop our movement. You, meaning Prabhupada, said to me, this is Nanda Kumar speaking, but meaning all of us, especially those of Chatur nature, should find out who they are and weed them out. Prabhupada said that
Oh.
to Nanda Kumar, was his servant, his personal servant. So these are
And he
things
saw
that
it.
are
Yeah.
these are things that we don't like to discuss, we don't like to think about, we don't we don't even like to hear them. But it's a reality. It's just like if you have a disease, say you get cancer, you don't go, okay, no, I don't have cancer. You go, all right, how did I get this? How can I cure it?
Yeah.
What's the cure?
Hmm.
That's practical. We have to be practical. So we got to be naive. We have to be practical, but at the same time, we can't lose the sweetness of our heart, right? Because that can also happen. Because I've seen many devotees become very bitter and very offensive. They
Mm.
lose the decorum of Vaishnava etiquette, right? So, because at the end of the day, we have to save ourselves and we have to endear ourselves to the Lord. And part of that is Vaishnava etiquette, which means we have to be able to see devotees as Krishna sees them, as that they're all dear souls, but they might just be off in certain ways.
Hmm.
But we still have to honor and respect them.
Yeah.
So it's so important that we don't lose our heart and humanity. At the same time, we have to be discerning. And it's all kind of like, as I'm speaking, I'm going like, wow, these are heavy pills to swallow, but they're very important because when it comes down to it, we're at war with the material energy. And the material energy in Maya is at war with us.
Yeah.
So unless we're vigilant, we will be in some way affected or overcome or infiltrated within our consciousness.
Mm.
We're not very, very vigilant.
Yeah. So that cure that you mentioned partially is, like you said, to get out there, to speak. I feel like Charlie Kirk, of course, he did that. And with his assassination, we see that so many people are now clearly seeing evil in front of them and wanting to make the switch to come to a more godly consciousness. So there are, of course, many ways to connect with Christianity within the world right now. And I feel like people took this chance and they sort of shifted in huge numbers, going back to church. We spoke about this just before this conversation, going back to the reading the Bible. Um, how could we also show ourselves in a way that people are willing to click in? Because what I notice is that Christianity, in the way that it's presented, it's very close to our Western culture. There are not so many hoops that people have to jump through in order to get to the core. Um, but I noticed that in our movement, often even the smallest thing like tilak or wearing different clothes or having songs in a different language, just presenting it also as a whole culture that can set people off. So how can we make that pathway to Krishna consciousness easy and smooth for people that they don't have to jump through so many hoops before they come to the essence?
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, great question, Prabhu. Before I answer that question, there is an aspect of your previous question that I didn't answer, that I just want to address first.
Yeah.
You asked, how do you deal with the negativity when you kind of come up against just differing views?
Let's say we publish this podcast, then
Yeah.
some people might not agree.
Yeah, some people are going to think that I'm completely off the wall, and I welcome that. I welcome that. As Charlie Kirk did. Let's talk about it.
Yeah.
Let's talk about it. Yeah, and that's just the way it is. So we have to just be sober-minded and grounded in our spiritual culture.
Mm.
Just like let's just look at what does Krishna say? What's Krishna say? She said it. Okay, Krishna says, 12th chapter, one who is not envious but a kind friend to all living entities, who does not think himself a proprietor, who is free from false ego, who is equal in both happiness and distress, who is tolerant, always satisfied, self-controlled, and engaged in devotional service with determination. His or her mind and intelligence fixed on me. Such a devotee of mine is very dear. He for whom no one is put into difficulty was not disturbed by anyone, who is equipoised in happiness and distress, fear and anxiety, is very dear to me. So these are the qualities that we were meant to cultivate. Yeah. This equipoised nature. Charlie Kirk, he embodied those qualities. He wasn't perfect. Mm-hmm. He didn't think of Krishna, but he was God conscious. Mm. He didn't know who Krishna was, but he knew God, and that's getting pretty close.
I wonder what would have happened if we would be on his podcast for one show.
I mean, for instance, Tulsi Gabbard. Now, Tulsi Gabbard is a great Vaishnavi. She's a Vaishnava. Mm. You might not know this, but Tulsi Gabbard's spiritual master is Siddhasarupananda, who was a disciple of Srila Prabhupada.
Okay.
And Prabhupada told Siddhasarup that in the future, one of your disciples will run for president of the United States.
Wow.
May become president of the United States. Many people feel that Tulsi is very likely to become the first woman president of the United States. Okay. And she is a Hare Krishna devotee, without question. She's a very powerful, advanced Vaishnavi, Tulsi Gabbard. So it's pretty fascinating that Trump picked her to be the head of all the intelligence agencies, and she's a warrior, but she's also got a heart of gold, and she's grounded in spiritual knowledge. She's a Hare Krishna devotee through and through. Wow. So something you may not or might not be aware of. But
No,
so,
no.
what was the question that you just asked me? I can't. I lost.
After you came back to you mean the Christian one?
Okay, so the Christian one. So how do we go through these? Your question was, if I can rephrase it to see I understand it correctly, that Christianity appears very simple. Jesus died for your sins. Accept the Lord in your heart. You'll be saved.
No, not
Oh,
necessarily the philosophy, but more that the culture surrounding Christianity is so close to Western
right,
culture.
right.
So
Good.
they wear the same clothes, they can, just go to church like that, like
Yeah.
themselves. But when they go to temple, we are dressing up, we are so different. And
Well, like I think people may criticize Sri Dhananandamaharaj for his Krishna West conception, but many devotees have been preaching in the West. We're kind of doing Krishna West before it became called Krishna West. In other words, we're just who we are. We just dress who we are. Like I don't particularly love wearing dhoti, but I don't mind wearing a dhoti. I like it, especially when I'm in India. But I think that somehow, I was working with Rupanuga, who was one of Prabhupada's earliest disciples. Rupanuga, I would really recommend everyone go on YouTube to the Prabhupada Memories and search Rupanuga. It's the most viewed memories of people talking about their memories of Srila Prabhupada than any other disciple. So Rupanuga, when he was at the Radha Damodar temple in India, he saw under Prabhupada's desk. This is back in the 70s. There was a pamphlet. There's an article. It said "Perfection at Home," and it was an article that Prabhupada wrote in the 50s about his vision of spreading Krishna consciousness. Was that it's kind of like Bhaktivinoda Sanam program, that make it very simple. Invite your friends, your family, or just your family, and just have a picture of Lord Chaitanya or the Panchatattva and Srila Prabhupada. Just try this chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra: Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Just try that for 10 minutes a day with your family, with your friends, and read from these Vedic literatures, hear from Srila Prabhupada, and just cultivate that in your home and try to cultivate it in other people's homes. Somehow or another, I think that the cultural external accoutrements of our Gaudiya culture are superficial. They're unnecessary. They're helpful if one wants to kind of live in a monastic setting. I certainly loved kind of that when I was a celibate monk, living in a temple in an ashram. I loved that. But, I don't do that anymore. I don't dress like that anymore. But when I go to the temple, I dress kind of in a similar way. But we just somehow have to make Krishna Bhakti Yoga accessible to people. So invite people for a meal, kirtan, go out to people, do these podcasts, do this, what you're doing, and not get hung up on the externals. The externals are just that. They're externals. What really matters is the process of there's the process of hearing and chanting, of hearing knowledge from the Vedic literatures and the pure devotee, and chanting the holy name, which I just did a minute ago, which anybody can do free of charge from any tradition, and just try to realize God and be happy and that to others. As Prabhupada said, what is the difficulty? It's very simple.
Yeah.
So, simple for the simple, difficult for the complicated. So I think we have to break down cultural barriers, not insist on the external dress. If people want to, that's fine. It's but somehow or another, as Prabhupada said in that one purport, strain our brains to in some way, how can we give this knowledge to others so they become happy? They become peaceful. They become connected to God, to Krishna, and can reawaken their eternal soul and go back to home, back to Godhead. There you go.
I think that was a beautiful, a few final words to round off this podcast, because we have spoken about so many things actually, and I hope that people who listen to this, they feel both inspired and they feel Like now they're gonna pull their brains and see what comes out in a way that we can be relevant in the world, that we can give, that we can draw inspiration from Charlie Kirk and his legacy. So thank you so much. Thank you
Yes,
for taking the
my
time.
my absolute honor. And yeah, and soon you'll see the Eighth House podcast is coming.
Yeah,
So
where can we find you? On Spotify?
um, you were going to be ultimately on all the platforms. If they don't censor us on YouTube, we'll be on YouTube too. But that's coming soon, and we're going to be discussing all these type of things. And we're going to have guests on from the medical realm, the political realm, the spiritual realm. I'm also going to be starting a separate podcast just on spiritual practice,
Oh, wow.
and just focused on spiritual practice. So yeah, we're going to be discussing so many different things, but somehow or another, I would just encourage everyone to take their own spiritual practice very seriously and make that the priority of one's life, and a connection with Srila Prabhupada, who's available to everyone, whoever your guru is, your teacher is. Prabhupada is the main squeeze, the main transcendental squeeze, available to everyone,
Yes.
and somehow find a way to reach people and be very discerning in where one gets one's knowledge from, because just like, for instance, you scroll on Instagram and it just goes on algorithms. One thing, it's
Yeah.
just reading, there's a certain type of brainwashing mental conditioning that's going on. So just be very, very discerning and very balanced and very sober minded, but make one's spiritual life the priority.
Thank you.
All right.
It's beautiful.
All right, Citralekha, such an honor to meet you.